Azeem, thank you so much for joining us today. As we begin, can you say a few words about your current role and what's on your purview?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me, Misha. I appreciate
Absolutely.
the opportunity to chat and talk. I'm currently the CISO for ABC Fitness. We
Hmm.
are the leading fit tech company in the world. So
Hmm.
a lot of people haven't heard of ABC Fitness, but they have heard of companies like Planet Fitness or Crunch Fitness, Anytime Fitness. So we essentially make club management software that clubs
Interesting.
can use to manage their members, to manage their accounts, to manage their memberships. And, we'll track everything from how a member shows up to when they leave, to how to market to them, how to get
Hmm.
new members, how to keep members, as well as all the billings.
I
Uh,
see.
and we are around the world. We've got several parts of ABC that people have heard of: Glowfox in Ireland, for example,
Hmm.
Evo in Brazil, Gym Sales and Trainerize, and Fitness BI, business analytics, and really a business intelligence tool.
Interesting. Interesting. So you track not just kind of the account management, also usage of how often members show up and how they actually how much value they're getting out of it. So it's probably it's I imagine probably the analytics of it that is also very, very interesting as well.
It's very interesting. People don't realize that gyms they go through high turnover, and we can help clubs reduce that turnover ratio and
Hmm.
keep more members, and that is a fantastic opportunity for them because they're not spending a lot of time just trying to keep their numbers up from the losses. They're able to really grow their companies.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, my friend has a F45 gym, so I'm well aware of the churn and all the effort that he puts into just bringing new members in and opening locations. And it's a heavy lift and a huge undertaking. So I'm sure the software like this is helpful. Well, that kind of paints the picture of where you are and at the moment in time. But for our listeners to get an idea of the trajectory of not just the dot but the line. Can you tell us how did you get in cybersecurity? What was the first entry point for you?
Well, I started out working in a small MSP a long
Hmm.
time ago, really in the 90s. And from there, I started getting into ISP work, or dial ups and internet modems and frame relay, and letting people connect to the internet, which
Hmm.
eventually led to a job as a webmaster.
Hmm.
I worked for a webmaster position for a while, and eventually the internet started to change there in the late 90s, and the place I was working for started to get into credit cards, online credit cards. And
Hmm.
so very quickly I went from webmaster to, oh, I've got credit cards that are coming through our systems, and we were taking credit card applications online, which meant social security numbers, date of birth. So being a webmaster very quickly turned into a security position. And that's really how my career in InfoSec started. Probably like a lot of people, we were working in IT, we were doing a lot of things around tech and internet connectivity. And as that has grown, the InfoSec field has grown as well.
Absolutely. Well, it's certainly kind of the industry exploded in size and scope. As I keep joking, it's no longer teenagers and hoodies hunched over computers. It's well-resourced enterprises with segregation of duties and vacation policies and bonuses and things like this. So it's well, it's scary how this whole space has evolved and where the world is going, but it's also it serves everyone best to be informed of the challenges they're facing and what kind of adversaries they're confronting. So it is also probably evidenced by not just the explosion in awareness, but also the number of vendors in the space, and just the awareness on all levels, at all levels of organization, from the board all the way down. The implications and of cybersecurity, both from kind of internal conversations, I would imagine, as well as, I mean, just reading the headlines, and it's probably like half a dozen breaches every day, various organizations. It's certainly a fairly scary world out there. So, as cybersecurity professionals, I would imagine they're the job security is fairly high because it doesn't appear that the level of threats will be subsiding anytime soon in terms of not necessarily success, but at least attempts. And it's interesting because I think I noticed in your background you also you worked for a cybersecurity vendor in the past, so you kind of is it Forescout?
Yes, that's correct. Forescout.
Yeah, so you kind of you have the benefit of kind of the practitioner as well as the vendor, both perspectives, which I think is hugely valuable. From that vantage point, what will be your advice for some of the junior professionals who are just starting the career, to your point, maybe transitioning from technology to cybersecurity, or maybe even further upstream of that, maybe just still in college, just looking at the space and figuring out if it would make a good career. What in your view they should 2-3 things they should focus on to set them up for success down the line?
Well, I think that if you're new to the field, getting some hands-on experience with IT is the best place to start.
Mm-hmm.
The IT field is no longer without security. You can't really do anything today in Azure, in AWS, in Google Cloud, or even
Mm-hmm.
on-prem without thinking about accounts, identity, access, logs, permissions, controls, and that's really the world of InfoSec. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're not sure, that's the first place to start is find a spot, work in a help desk, work your way up through an IT organization, perhaps look at governance and compliance in your organizations and see if
Mm-hmm.
there's a fit there. You know, there's a lot of synergies between legal, IT, and InfoSec. In any of those areas you can get into, you're going to find yourself looking at information security related systems, events,
Mm-hmm.
and an opportunity to kind of see what's happening in the InfoSec world. There are places that'll take on a junior analyst role in InfoSec, and that's
Mm-hmm.
not a bad idea as well. Certifications, I think, are also an easy way to really differentiate yourself, especially when you're new. ISC is out there with a bunch of really great certs. ISACA has some really good junior certs that are out there, and those will open doors for you that may not otherwise be open because you are junior in the field.
Mm-hmm. It makes a lot of sense. And would you recommend people going kind of broad and shallow before diving deep into one area, whether it's, you know, because things are fairly diverse. I mean, pen testing requires one set of skills, and GRC requires maybe some overlapping skills, but it's a fairly different kind of area. But for someone who's just getting into this, it may be difficult to get this decision. Okay, it's this or that. Like which door to knock on and which rabbit hole to tumble into. Would you suggest to sample them first?
I would actually suggest you find a smaller company to work at first.
Mm.
You know, the problem is when you get into a bigger company, you're going to have a specific task or a specific role, and that's what you're going to be asked to do.
Mm-hmm.
If you find yourself in a spot where there's 2 or 4 or 5 people on an InfoSec team,
Mm-hmm.
very quickly you're going to have your pick of what do you want to work on, because they all need to be worked on and there's not enough people in the teams to do it. And that's really the easiest way to get a good sample of everything that's out there, is to come and work for a smaller team.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be work in every area of InfoSec. You covered a couple, right? Like GRC for sure, cloud security, corporate security, identity, access control, governance, risk, pen testing, you name them. The list can go on and on.
For
You
sure.
find yourself in a small spot, you're going to get a sample of all of those, and you'll kind of figure out what you like and what you don't like.
Certainly, it makes a lot of sense. And also, I mean, it's to your point, in a small organization, you're kind of forced a little bit to wear many hats. And also smaller organizations, kind of in terms of size. I mean, it's there may not be as well resourced as I know the IBMs and the Microsofts of this world, but also smaller organizations tend to move faster, whether they're growing or just kind of by the nature of the fact that the nodes of communication, like there are fewer nodes, there are fewer conversations, fewer meetings, and things move faster than something like Fortune 50 company where they think in decades. So it's maybe a well-funded startup or rapidly growing startup. I mean, I'm just kind of looking back. That's probably what I would choose if I had a chance.
That's absolutely what I would choose as well, and that's kind of how it happened for me as well. You know, one of the first companies I worked for, I was employee 25, so pretty small company. The second place I worked for, I was employee 17.
Mm,
So two companies, small, they've both now grown to much bigger numbers. But there's a lot going on, a lot of change, and less talking, more doing.
exactly.
So that's really what you need. You have to be careful. InfoSec, you have to be careful in what you're doing. You really need to think it through. There are very serious ramifications to mistakes, but certainly in a smaller company, you're going to move a lot faster than you will in a bigger one.
For sure, for sure. And speaking of kind of threats and cybersecurity issues, there was some consensus on certain issues that are top of mind for some, but on the margin, I think different practitioners tend to emphasize areas that may kind of be different from another person. In your view, what are the top three most pressing cybersecurity challenges that are facing cybersecurity executives right now?
Well, these are probably the three that have been the top three for a long time. Phishing is certainly the top of most people's minds.
Mm-hmm.
AI is going to make the phishing world very different over the next couple of years. The days of getting poorly written phishing attempts are going to be gone. And instead, we're going to see mass scale targeted phishing attempts. Systems will start scanning LinkedIn profiles. They're going to start scanning Facebook. They're going to start scanning your online systems, and they're going to craft messages to each individual user using AI to make them look real. So phishing, which has been a big threat, but not one that really targeted at a mass level, is going to become a bigger threat because of that. The other areas that I see are security misconfigurations and security patches and vulnerabilities. AI is also playing a big role in that part of the world where now those systems can target and attack around the clock, right? It's no longer do I need to have a smart hacker who works maybe 6 hours a day or 7 hours a day and still needs to sleep and eat and live a life. No, these systems are out there working around the clock and they're learning as they go. So that's going to be a big area for organizations to really stamp down and clean up their act, is get your patching a basic hygiene, right? This is basic hygiene. Get your patching and your security controls lined up. And I think the third area that people need to pay attention to is identity. It's simple, but it's also complicated. It's not just do I have an account and do I have a password? It's how do I get access? Am I using MFA? Am I using MFA that has phishing capabilities in it? Can I still be phished? SMS and these text MFA that a lot of companies are using, those are still vulnerable to phishing attacks. So how quickly will organizations move to more secure systems like FIDO2 to protect their users from these types of attacks? I think these are going to be the three big areas that people need to pay attention to moving forward over the next couple of years. And we didn't really talk about threat actors that are out there. There are still nation states that are spending a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of effort, but they typically are going after targeted groups or targeted systems, infrastructure, telecom, things like that. And if you're not in those particular areas, maybe you don't have to pay as much attention, but everyone needs to pay attention to phishing and patching and identity.
For sure. And then to that point, you may not be a high value target for a nation state, but there is like ransomware for hire, right? So if you have a world facing surface, then and the cost of launching an attack, I would imagine probably diminishing, especially with the use of some of those tools. Someone will knock on your door eventually. It's just a matter of time.
Ransomware is changing as well. For the last few years, we saw a lot of encryption ransomware. We're gonna encrypt your data, and unless you pay us, you're not going to get it back. And firms have started to fight back by having immutable backups and having backups that are sitting outside of that system. And now what we're seeing is as these infiltrators get in, instead of going and encrypting systems right away, they're sitting around for a little bit. And the reason they're doing that is they're grabbing the data, they're mining the data. And so their tactics have started to change. No longer is it pay me or I'm going to keep your data and it's going to be encrypted. It's pay me or I'm going to release your internal data and your information out into the public world. And that's an evolving threat in ransomware that people need to pay attention to.
It's scary. I guess. I guess. Other than going back to pen and paper and just passing notes, there is no really, it's and I think it's just more than anything, just a testament of how much bigger role technology is playing in our lives now. And when I say our lives, I mean at a personal level, at a family level, at a organization level, at a city, state, government. It's like on all those levels, technology is like we rely so much more on it, and the bigger role the technology is playing in our lives, it just the bigger the attack surface. I mean, fundamentally, right? So if your pacemaker is controlled by your phone app, it better be protected. If you're driving in the car and it's smart, so it probably behooves you to make sure that someone cannot just hijack it and crash you into a tree. I mean, it's just
Yeah, and
all those scenarios. I mean, it seems like a scary movie, but the further we go down the road that the world is connected and everything's connected, devices, and how do you know that your fridge is not spying on you? Like all those things. It's, I mean, it's not to sound paranoid, but it's not an implausible scenario for the future. But I want to double click on one thing that you mentioned, which is phishing, which fundamentally goes back to just tools and technology, just one aspect of cybersecurity, but we also rely on people, and that's kind of the frontier, the employees of the company. And often I hear the sentiment that you can patch your systems, but you can't upgrade your user, which goes back to kind of the question of training and gamifying the experience and making sure that people who are not part of the cybersecurity team, but they're still wear the cybersecurity hat and their internal communications and how they go about doing their business. How do you think about kind of not letting this aspect of cybersecurity lag behind, because you can kind of build the most formidable, impregnable fortress, but then the person who manages the side door is just goes on break for a long time and just left open, and that's kind of the access point.
your users are almost always going to be your weakest link. And as long as you remember that and adequately cover for that, you'll have some coverage. I don't agree with the concept that you can't upgrade your users. Users can be taught. I put my users through a monthly security awareness training program every single month. But I understand fatigue. We understand they can't be too long. They've got to be fun. They've got to keep people engaged. So I keep them short, 3 minutes, 4 minutes at most every month, a couple of questions every other month, just to kind of keep them on their toes. But the idea is to keep security on their mind. We send out a security newsletter every week, and it shows up in everybody's mailbox. And I run phishing tests, maybe once a month, maybe twice a month. And then we'll send out the reviews afterward to remind people, hey, we sent this out to you. You may have clicked on it. You may not have. Here's what to look for. Here's what not to look for. And if you happen to be one of those people that clicked on it, you get immediately sent to training to go and to look at it and see, here's what you missed. Try to catch it next time. And if you miss it again, and we bring a person to help you. So we'll get one-on-one individualized training for the end user to look through these things and help them sort it out. And really, orgs, this is where HR teams and legal teams and the CEOs need to get involved, because there's got to be a stick as well. You can't have users that continuously miss, because now that's a risk in your organization. There's got to be, hey, there's some training, there's some re-education, but there's some consequences if you're not paying attention to these phishing tests. In particular for admins and people that have access to finance systems and those in your organization that have critical resources and assets available to them, that group in particular, you need to pay really close attention to when it comes to phishing and phishing tests and how they're doing.
For sure. Well, there's a story that I sometimes like to tell that I can bring up on the next meeting. I think it happened to I think it was a technology company in California. I'm not going to name the name to protect the innocent, but that particular department had a barbecue on Friday night. And they must have shared it on Facebook, to your point of hackers or AI systems kind of monitoring social media. So they must have posted the announcement on Facebook on one of the social media channels they're open on Saturday morning, an email was sent to people, subject line, something along the lines, pictures from the barbecue, and said, hey, had a great time last night. Check out the pictures, and there's a link. And people, it's so contextual, and also maybe there was alcohol involved, maybe it was an awkward picture. I have to see what I look like in those pictures, and someone clicked, and it was so devious and so simple, and it worked. And again, those are people in tech who are sophisticated, and they understand the consequences and understand the concept of phishing, and it takes one, and it's kind of the biggest challenge that I think a lot of people are facing, is that as defenders we have to be right 100% of the time, and attackers have to only be right once to kind of install the back door and move within the system, which is, I guess, probably one of the bigger challenges.
Well, yes. I mean, you're absolutely true. And that brings up another concept that people need to pay attention to, which is layers of defense. People are gonna get past your first layer eventually, if they're not already past it today. You've got to have systems on the back end that can cover you, that maybe will check those links or those clicks when somebody clicks on them to see what's going outbound, and maybe check that site before your users get to them. You've got to have some systems on your machines that check resident memory, that are looking for signatures, that are looking for detections on a machine for anomalous behavior. Expect your users to make a mistake. Don't just sit there and be like, oh, I've got some phishing tools, we're good to go. Or, I've got Proofpoint in front, or Mimecast in front, no 365, and they're going to catch it. No, you've got to look at backend systems, have something like Darktrace or CrowdStrike or SlashNext running on the back end to look at what you're doing and give you some additional layers of defense. And, that also means you probably need to have a SOC running that is looking at logs and events coming in for anomalous behavior. All right. There's a big difference between what happens in your home and what happens on a work computer. And a lot of that is mixing today, because a lot of people are home with their work computers.
Exactly, work from home.
And that has really changed the concept of how security teams have to do defense and how they're defending systems. We try to tell users, hey, this is a work computer. It's only for work purposes. But I've talked to dozens of CISOs, if not hundreds of CISOs, and they all tell me the same thing. You know what? We always find software or some kid using the machine at home that their parents gave them to do homework on. Right? These things are happening, and we have to be aware of that. We need to defend accordingly, not just say, oh, well, it's a work computer, I'm sure they've got a home one and they're not sharing. No, you've got to defend against the unexpected. And in this case, it's at this point, it's expected. So you must defend against this threat.
Which makes a lot of sense, because you cannot afford to have your system being fragile. It needs to be resilient, meaning you need to expect that, yes, that some small doors will be left unattended. So that's when you build a castle, it's like there is a outer wall, and there's inner wall, and there are walls within. So it's even if the outer wall is breached, it's not going to topple the whole castle. You still have a business that's running, and you're dealing with the intruders. Nothing. You can afford to have everything go up in smoke just because of one incident and one entry point. That makes a lot of sense.
It can't just be identity. It's got to be least privilege too, right? Be very careful with how much rights you give a person. And this is just a problem that we all deal with. Authorization creep happens inside of orgs all the time. Somebody's been there 2 years, and they've been there 5 years, and they've been there 10 years. They've worked in 2 departments, 3 departments, 4 departments. And you know what? Before you know, they've got admin rights to 10 different systems, and they only use one, right? That's one of the typical things that we see.
Yeah, or they need access for a project. The project was finished 3 years ago, and they still have access even though they don't need it.
Those are the types of things that really keep CISOs awake at night. And they're hard to deal with, right? They're not just a InfoSec problem. They require the IT team. They require the CIO or the CTO to get involved. They require the HR and the people and culture teams to be involved. And hey, when someone moves roles, it's got to go through the workflow. And that really requires the organization to step up. And this is the role of CISOs today. It's not just, hey, I've got an antivirus and I've got a firewall. It's educating the workforce. It's educating your executives. It's coming up with plans that will build broad, resilient systems that can withstand attacks that are planned and unplanned, that are intentional and unintentional. And usually it's the unintentional user that will make a mistake that will cause you a problem. Sure, there are targeted attacks. Sure, there are going to be phishing attacks, and there's nation state actors that are out there. But more often than not, it's your users making silly mistakes.
That makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. So it's a never a dull moment. It's always a moving target, whether it's threats, new patches, new technologies, new vendors. It's always new approaches, new realities like work from home. So it's always and I think part of the reason why it's so interesting is that you have to be constantly curious. You have to be constantly learning about new approaches, about what's out there. It's as I hear people saying, cybersecurity is a team sport. And talking about vendors, I know you have this, as I mentioned, good perspective of being on the vendor side, but also on the practitioner side as well. Sometimes when we talk to Bithinia members and we bring up the topic of vendors, almost always kind of invokes a very visceral reaction. Because on the one hand, obviously, we need the vendors to provide the tools to keep the organization secure, but on the other, a lot of them are venture funded and very incentivized to grow, and which results into unending stream of emails asking for time and demos and outreaches on LinkedIn. From kind of your experience last 3 months, 6 months, without naming names, what are some of the examples where a vendor surprised you to the positive side by focusing on building a relationship and providing value without really looking for anything transactional from the get-go? And on the flip side, what are some of the pet peeves of yours in dealing with vendors?
I think that you will find a good vendor is one that will spend time to understand your business. And that is key, is understanding what is it that you do, how do you do it, what are your pain points, and then talk to you about possible solutions. And sometimes those solutions aren't going to be with that vendor. And if you've got a security vendor that says, hey, you know what, maybe we're not the best fit for this, maybe you should look at these other tools, you might be onto a good vendor there. That's not to say that that there aren't really large vendors out there that have a large suite of tools. I can name some of the big ones, like Microsoft. Microsoft has a boatload of security tools. They continue to acquire companies left and right. They're building into their repertoire. And in a lot of ways, in a lot of companies, you can go to Microsoft and be like, yeah, give me your top 15 security products, and I got a ton of really good stuff. But they're still missing things. They're still kind of weak on the cloud side. AWS, the same thing. They've got some issues on their EC2 side where they know they've got gaps and they can't solve them. And there are other vendors that can. So I think you got to be careful that there are bigger vendors out there that can give you a lot of tools, but none of them really can cover you head to toe. And that's why you're not seeing that in the market. There's one security vendor that everyone says, just go to these guys and you're good, because that doesn't exist. As far as pet peeves, I think you hit on them. I've got a great solution. I think this will work great for your company. Can I get 5 minutes to show you this great new tool that we've got, right? These are just sales. These are just pitches. They're almost blind. They don't know what you do. They don't know what your business is, what your business model is, what country you're in. And those companies need to do a better job of going after their markets. And they're really not, when all you're getting are blind sales calls from people saying, I've got a great new tool. I've got a great new GRC tool that will do, what's the same thing that 10 other GRC tools are doing already, or a great new SIM when there's already 5 really big ones out there that we know work fairly well, if not very well in some cases.
That makes sense. Well, I think the environment is changing, and it's interesting because it's a couple of years ago, it seems there was it was an acquisition of larger like I don't know, Cisco or Microsoft or Checkpoint would acquire a company every other month, and more recently it was every other week, and now it seems like it's two a day. So it's it seems like there will be some weeding out and some consolidation going on, which will, I would hope, bring a little bit closer this idea of single pane of glass and having more of a 360 coverage, as you said, head to toe. I mean, it was never going to be 100%, but I would imagine that when we talk to our members, they say, well, I have, between 30 to 60 different cybersecurity vendors. So it's 30 to 60 different dashboards or so to look at. I think this consolidation will hopefully will collapse some of those dashboards into kind of more of a singular tool. Hopefully, I mean, it looks like that's the trend where people are, things are going. Do you see the same?
I don't see the trend exactly that way, and let me tell you why. Mandiant was recently purchased by Google, and Cisco recently acquired Splunk. Those were large, massive deals. And if you look at the balance sheets for the big companies, and there's really like only 4 or 5 that are big enough to do this type of thing, right? Google, Microsoft, Cisco, we've named a few, Amazon, that's it, right? The big companies, their balance sheets don't have the ability right now to do massive acquisitions after those last 2. So what you will see is a lot of smaller companies, a lot of smaller startups are going to get acquired. Companies that maybe you haven't heard of, companies that are just starting to get traction. Those are the companies that people are looking at now to acquire and bring those technologies in, because frankly, it's going to be 18 to 24 months, I think, before some of these balance sheets for these larger organizations will have the ability to absorb a large cash transaction. But they'll continue to make small ones. And you're right, they're happening almost every day. Most of them fly under the radar because people don't know those companies, but internally, large orgs know where their weaknesses are or where they need to go defend in the market or where they need to grow their TAM. And that's what they're going out there and going after.
Makes sense. Well, it's a very interesting perspective. Well, switching gears, Azeem, I know you're probably a member of a number of different groups, associations, societies, or whatnot for cybersecurity executives. We're always looking for feedback in terms of what Afinia does well, where we lack, and what we can do differently or better. Do you have any advice, anything to share?
Firstly, I'll say that I really like to see your monthly emails that go out, especially promotions and new hires for Afinia members. That looks great and exciting, and I think it makes the rest of us say, hey, maybe one day I'll be on that list. So that's a very positive thing, and I'm really excited to see that, and excited for everyone that shows up on that list, and congratulations to all of you. What I'd like to see more of is larger get-togethers of CISOs. That's where I think there's an ability for collaboration, an ability for us to share knowledge and talk to people. And one of the things that kind of sucks when you're a CISO in an org is everyone asks you, well, what do you want to do? Well, what should we do? What do you think? And there's not a whole lot of resources inside of an org outside of your own team that you can go to bounce ideas off of, or to bring questions up. And really, that's where other CISOs come into play. And that's what we need as a community. The CISO community forever in the past, it wasn't that way, right? It was, hey, this is my stuff and that's your stuff. I can't tell you what I'm doing because it's secret. And that's changed, really. It really has changed in the last 10 to 15 years. And now it's much more about collaboration. It's about, hey, we're the good guys, and the bad guys are coming after all of us. Exactly. They're not just coming after my company; they're coming after yours, and I might be next. And so that world of collaboration is where we really need to focus on and pool our resources and really pool our strengths. There's a ton of really smart people in the CISO and InfoSec community at large. Really, really bright minds, and getting those people in front of others, having them teach, learn, share their experiences. That is really where we need to focus as a community.
Yeah, well, if we're playing against a very resource team, if we were siloed, we have we don't stand a chance. But it's really kind of going back to cybersecurity as a team sport. And when you said gatherings, is it more face to face? Do you think it would be a good idea? Because we do plan a handful of them through the remainder of the year and next. Some of them in conjunction with kind of large conferences like RSA or Black Hat or whatnot, Gartner. But we also plan some of the virtual roundtables that are not necessarily. I mean, they don't have to be co-located. Which one would you think make more sense?
I think you probably have to do both because it's hard to do monthly get-togethers in person, especially with people being all around the country, maybe even around the world, right? So a few of those in person every year, and then monthlies that everyone can join at their time and leisure as they have the ability to do so. Probably the best way of doing it. It's hard to get people to show up to events. We're busy. We're super busy, as you know. Executives are hard to get a hold of. Their calendars are full, and asking people to fly out for events that happen more than once or twice a year is really tough to do. But like you said, if you do them in conjunction with larger events like RSA or Black Hat, DEF CON, in those areas, maybe a week before or 2 days before, or really even a few hour session in the middle of a couple of those, you're going to get a much larger group of people that will have the opportunity to attend.
For sure. No, it's definitely something that we'll be doing we'll be doing more of that going forward. As we wrap up, I know we're coming up on time, Azeem. Last question. Imagine you have a crystal ball and you can see into the future and you can see what's going to happen 6 months from now, 12 months from now. What are the 2-3 things all CISOs will be thinking about, anxious about, obsessed about? What will be in the headlines maybe 12 months from now?
I think LLMs are going to be on the minds of CISOs moving forward. And there's been a lot of hype over the last year and a half, and not all of that has really come to fruition, but those systems are getting mature and they're getting better. And in the next 6 months to a year, we're going to start seeing them out in the real world, and they're going to be very tough to beat. I'll give you an example of something that scares me. The recent MGM attack, right? It was a simple attack. It was, hey, someone called into a help desk and said, hey, I need my password reset. Well, it wasn't the person who said it was. And they got access that way. They're able to move laterally and they're in. Well, what are you going to do? Today we can do something fairly simple, right? Password resets now will require some form of two-factor authentication. We're going to require you to show up on video to talk to your help desk, and somebody's got to verify who you are by looking at your face. Well, what happens when deepfakes are out?
Exactly.
Right? And that's the kind of stuff that's coming in the next 6 months. It's going to get tougher and tougher to do basic security, and that's what's going to keep people up.
Yeah, well, it's never-ending fight defenders and attackers. So I think and hopefully there'll be ways to use this new technology for good, as I'm sure it'll be used for evil as well. So
the playing field is, I mean, you nailed it, right? The playing field is moving. They're getting tougher, but we're also getting the same type of tools. The thing that people have to remember is that hacker states, they've got unlimited budgets and unlimited money. And security teams inside of orgs, we have limited budgets and limited resources. And we've got to be really careful what we do and where we pool our resources and what we're going to do. Because those guys, they've got all day and their entire budget is hacking us, right? Exactly. Our company's budget, we're a small part of this, right? Most InfoSec teams are lucky to have 1% of revenue.
Well, it's as you said, it's take care of basic hygiene, which is your low-hanging fruit. Make your organization resilient so it's not fragile when the first perimeter breaks, and invest in your people and training your people. And at the end of the day, as someone said, you don't need to run faster than the bear, you just need to run faster than the other guy. So you want to be, you don't want to look like an easy target because they'll just move on to the next target.
Yeah, you don't need to be at the front of the pack, but you need to be near the front. And that's what people need to remember is, you don't want to be the low-hanging fruit. Make it so that they go somewhere else, because the first few things they try, you've got covered, the basic stuff.
Exactly. Well, Azeem, thank you so much for your time. This was very interesting, and thank you for sharing your insights. Where can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Misha. I appreciate the time.
One thing you'll learn about cybersecurity is that it's always changing, it's always evolving, and therefore learning and succeeding is a lot easier together than it is apart. Cybersecurity essentially is a team sport. And I know for a fact that you have a lot of choices, various groups, meetups, societies to select from. However, today I'd like to invite you to join Affinia, not only because you'll get access to our private Slack groups, community websites, speaking engagements, and consulting gigs, not only because Affinia is free for members, and it's also vendor free, so you'll not be spammed or you'll not be drinking out of fire hose of solicitations, but also because you'll be joining a tribe of thousands of your cybersecurity peers.
I find a lot of value in the Slack channel, being able.
I'm very satisfied with my relationship with Affinia.
Something that I really like about Affinia, one is provides relevant news in a very concise way.
So as you can see, you'll be in a good company. So please go to affinia.com, aphinia.com, click sign up. It's a short form, and also you're on the other side.